Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of Loomer Unleashed. I'm your host, Laura Loomer. And on today's episode of Loomer Unleashed, we're going to talk about how Ron DeSantis is now an absentee governor in the state of Florida and how he has abandoned Floridians for the sake of pursuing his failing presidential campaign. While Ron DeSantis continues to fall in national presidential polls, the crisis that Floridians are experiencing when it comes to their ability to pay for things like utilities, insurance, and keep their families safe from the looming immigration crisis here in the state of Florida is only getting worse. You see, over the last few years, the mainstream media and the GOP establishment have both created a facade around Ron DeSantis in the state of Florida. You may have heard things like, wow, Ron DeSantis is the best governor in America, or wow, Florida is the free state of Florida. And as a Florida resident, I'm here to tell you that that's just simply not true. The media and the GOP rhino establishment created this false narrative and they peddled it on a national scale because they needed to convince the American people that Donald Trump wasn't worthy of a second term. However, if you actually live in Florida or you take a moment to speak to Floridians or you come to Florida to understand the situation on the ground, you'll quickly find out that life in Florida really isn't so great. So in this episode, we're going to delve into several issues that are affecting the quality of life for Floridians. And I'm going to make the case as to why Ron DeSantis needs to end his failing presidential campaign and come back to Florida and do the job that he was elected to do. And that's a second term as governor of Florida. The first crisis that Ron DeSantis is not addressing and has completely neglected amid his presidential tour is the growing insurance crisis here in the state of Florida. Currently, as it stands, Florida has the highest property homeowner insurance rates in the entire country. The average Florida homeowner is paying over $6,000 per year for their insurance rates, while the national average is $1,700. The rise in premiums are now exceeding the cost of some people's mortgages, making life in Florida extremely unaffordable, especially if you're a senior citizen living on Social Security or a fixed income. This, without a doubt, is going to cause a housing market crash here in the state of Florida. And Ron DeSantis better get on this soon because we are quickly approaching hurricane season. And all it's going to take is one really nasty, catastrophic hurricane here in Florida to wipe out hundreds of thousands of homes in the state of Florida. And the market is going to crash. This year alone, over 17 insurance carriers have pulled out of providing coverage from the state of Florida, with Farmers Insurance being the latest insurance carrier to pull out this week. This has forced nearly 2 million Floridians to take out policies with Citizens Homeowners Insurance, which is the state insurer of last resort here in the state of Florida. However, Citizens Insurance is insolvent. They don't even have enough reserves right now to currently pay out claims from the last hurricane, Hurricane Ian, that left thousands of Floridians without a home and without roofs. The second crisis that is worsening here in the state of Florida is the malaria crisis. You may have heard that there are several active malaria cases here in the state of Florida. And this is a pretty big problem because we haven't had a case of malaria in the United States of America for the last 20 years. But now various communities throughout the state of Florida are being plagued with this infectious disease. And Governor Ron DeSantis has yet to comment on it, and he's nowhere to be found. Why? Because he's too busy jet-setting around the country in states like Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada, pretending like he's going to be the next president. Along with the malaria crisis, Ron DeSantis has also been completely silent over the fact that he allowed for hundreds of thousands of genetically engineered mosquitoes to be released into the state of Florida. Florida residents had expressed outrage over a British company announcing their plans to release hundreds of thousands of genetically engineered mosquitoes in the state of Florida, but it was still approved by the state under Ron DeSantis' administration. And now, with the growing cases of malaria, a lot of people are asking why, and where's Ron DeSantis on this? Oh yeah, that's right, he's nowhere to be found because he's an absentee governor. The third crisis that is plaguing the pockets of millions of Florida citizens is the growing utility crisis. You may have noticed if you live here in the state of Florida, like I do, that you're paying a lot of money for your utilities, money that you may not be able to afford to spend. In fact, over the last year alone, there has been a 22% increase in utility bills, which is the largest increase in Florida history. And why are utility prices so high? Well, you may have noticed if you take a look at the expenditure reports that Ron DeSantis and his allies in the Florida Republican Party have received a total of over $9.5 million from groups like FPL and their subsidiaries. Recent reports show that the average monthly electric bill here in the state of Florida is 13% higher than the national average. You can guarantee that that's causing a major financial crisis for many Floridians because Florida also happens to have the nation's highest rate of inflation. In fact, Ron DeSantis allowed for the Florida Public Service Commission Board to be stacked with his appointees, and shortly after stacking it with his hand-selected appointees, the commission approved the largest electric hike in Florida history in 2021, resulting in a 20% increase in electric costs to Florida residents. And of course, Ron DeSantis doesn't seem to give a damn about this, and why would he, as long as he continues to receive enormous amounts of campaign contributions from all of the companies that he's assisting. The next crisis that is creating not only a crime crisis in the state of Florida, but a public safety issue for Floridians is the growing immigration crisis. Under Ron DeSantis, illegal alien migrant boat crossings into Florida have increased substantially. In fact, according to reports by the U.S. Border Patrol and Coast Guard, Florida has experienced the largest escalation in illegal alien migrations via boat into Florida in the last decade, all under the DeSantis administration. And look, Ron DeSantis can make all the fancy campaign commercials for his presidential campaign that he wants while he's posing in his aviator sunglasses at the U.S. southern border, pretending like he's going to crack down on illegal immigration. If Ron DeSantis is so focused on securing our borders, maybe he ought to get his ass back down to Florida, where he's supposed to be working and doing his job as governor, and secure our borders here. Because as it stands, Florida is being invaded by hundreds of illegal aliens from places like Cuba and Haiti on a weekly basis. And lastly, when Ron DeSantis finally realizes that he has no chance of making it to the White House, perhaps he can address another issue of grave concern to Floridians, and that's the fact that he has allowed for the Capitol Police to set up their own office in Tampa, Florida, for the sake of tracking down patriots who attended the January 6th protests over our stolen election. Now, if Ron DeSantis is such a patriot and so America first, why is he allowing for Capitol Police to work in collusion with the FBI and local law enforcement officers to literally hunt down Trump supporters in the state of Florida? And if you've been following my reports, you know that Florida has the highest number of J6 defendants. And to this day, over 2 years after the protests on January 6th of 2021, Floridians are still having their doors kicked in by the FBI, and many Floridians are jailed in gulags where they have even been denied treatment for their cancer, simply because they are Trump supporters and political prisoners who were brave enough to show up and protest January 6th. And what has Ron DeSantis done about this? Absolutely nothing. In fact, testimony from several of the family members of Floridians who are literally rotting away in jail cells right now over their participation on January 6th have said publicly that Ron DeSantis doesn't answer their phone calls. But hey, don't take it from me, take it from their mouth directly. I think that we can all agree at this point that Ron DeSantis' presidential campaign is an absolute disaster. It's time for Ron DeSantis to come to terms with the fact that he's losing to Donald Trump. It's time for Ron DeSantis to come to terms with the fact that he's never going to be president of the United States of America. And unless Ron DeSantis wants to continue down this path of absolute political annihilation and political suicide, I suggest he end his presidential campaign and come back to Florida and stop being an absentee governor. The people of Florida deserve better. They didn't vote for a part-time governor. They didn't vote for an absentee governor. They voted for somebody who they thought was going to be dedicated to Floridians and dedicated to the job of a 4-year second term, which is what he promised us. Time will only tell if Ron DeSantis is going to come to his senses about his failing presidential campaign and what decision he's going to make. Is he going to continue running for president and allow for all of these crises in the state of Florida to get even more out of control? Or will he come back to Florida and do the job that the taxpayers are paying him to do? I really hope that Ron DeSantis makes the right decision soon, not for his sake, but for the sake of Floridians. I'm Laura Loomer, and if you enjoyed this content, please be sure you subscribe to my Substack, lauraloomer.substack.com. It's free to subscribe, but if you want to support my independent journalism, you can subscribe for $7 a month or $70 a year. Also, please be sure that you're following me on Twitter, Gab, Getter, and Truth Social at Laura Loomer. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the sponsor of this episode of Loomer Unleashed, Goldco. Banks are getting bailed out, and who's going to pay for it? You are. They say that taxpayers won't pay, and they say that other banks will pay. But how are those banks going to get the money? They'll probably raise your bank fees like they always do. And if the Fed step in, you'll likely also be paying an inflation tax. In times like this, storing all your money in a bank may be very risky, as we have seen. So what can two average Joes like you and I even do about it? You can protect your wealth with gold and silver, just like so many other Americans and even banks are doing right now. Call 855-317-5157 or visit goldco.com/Laura Loomer to learn how to protect your savings with gold and silver. Take action today to protect yourself and your family from financial collapse. Again, call 855-317-5157 or visit goldco.com/Laura Loomer and learn how you could get up to $10,000 in bonus silver while supplies last. That's 855-317-5157 or goldco.com/Laura Loomer. Thanks for watching. See you next time on Loomer Unleashed.